Davante Adams appears that he will be traded from the Las Vegas Raiders. Which teams make the most sense for him? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her over on Yahoo. And it's a Wednesday episode, so of course that means Matt Williamson is here. You can follow him on Twitter at Williamson NFL. We've got a busy show for you guys today. We're going to talk about Rashee Rice. We're going to talk about how many quarterbacks would you take over Jayden Daniels in your dynasty leagues. But Matt, I want to start with this. We got some news on Tuesday that Davante Adams would like to be traded. It was a very nice trade request. He said he would prefer to be traded. Which team or teams do you think would be the best landing spot for Davante for his fantasy and dynasty value?
So Peacock and I are going to record after this, and that's going to be one of our topics is who should be interested. And I came up with about 10 teams that at least should call or at least consider. The best landing spot's Kansas City, but I think Al Davis would come out of his grave if they traded him within the division to the Chiefs. I mean, I can't see that move happening.
And I don't even know if the Chiefs have a cap room to do it. So
I haven't done that homework on it.
It doesn't seem like they do. So, I mean,
okay.
I think everybody would agree. That's the best spot. It seems pretty far-fetched.
Okay. Do we just spit off the 10 names?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Kansas City and the Chargers in the division. And stop me if any of them are just no cap chance, because I did not do that homework. I just got to scroll these down 5 minutes ago. What about your Cowboys?
I think
I don't love it, but you know.
I think the Cowboys would be they would do it if they viewed it as a 1-year rental, like basically cut him after the year and pay $13 million to rent him for 13, 14 games. The problem is it going to cost a 3rd round pick to rent him for 1 year?
I assume so. Maybe even a smidge more, you know.
Probably not.
Yeah. Steelers.
Kate?
I mean, yeah. I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, even without a secondary wide receiver, we've seen Justin Fields play some pretty good football. I think having a complimentary wideout opposite George Pickens is just really, like, everybody's kind of talking about how the Steelers aren't this exciting powerhouse of an offense, but I keep going back. Is it a chicken or the egg situation? Are they not this super exciting offense? Because it's George Pickens and literally nothing else. Like Van Jefferson, I think literally ranks dead last in yards per route run. He is a non-factor in the offense. They really just have nothing else to work with. So I think I'd be very intrigued to see it, but trying not to be a biased Steelers fan.
And they have a ton of cap space next year. They could maybe work on, some kind of extension, some kind of new deal, something along those lines. So it's not a rental, Washington.
Yes.
I think that's
go for it.
Right.
You're 3-1. You're leading the division by a game. Go for it.
Everyone's going to link them to the Jets.
Yeah.
But they're on the list. It's too early in the timeline for the Patriots, but they could sure use them, and they have cap space, and they could extend them, and it'd be Drake May would say thank you. Buffalo,
yes,
and really go for it.
I would love that for the Bills. I don't love that for Davante Adams' fantasy value, though.
Agreed. My last two are Baltimore. I mean, he's better than Bateman, and again, push your chips in, and the Saints, which I know you're fond of.
Yeah, that's my favorite, right? Because if you want Davante Adams to have the most fantasy and dynasty value, You go with a quarterback that can absolutely feed him the ball and that has a history of doing that. We know Davante loves Derek Carr. That's the main reason he went out to Las Vegas in the first place. And you look at the numbers that Davante had with Derek Carr, they were ridiculous. They're wide receiver number one numbers. And I know they have Chris Olave. I know they have Rashid Shaheed. But if Davante Adams is in that offense, you can count on him getting double-digit targets every week. Kate?
I
saw that face. You don't love it.
I understand it. I just want to find somebody and I'm married, happily married. I just want to find somebody who loves me the way that Derek Carr or the way that Davante Adams loves Derek Carr. Like I'm just never I get it, but again, my kind of question is the offense going to have enough to go around for Chris Olave? Like I get having two top tier wide receivers, but like you're also, I think, probably capping the value of Chris Olave there. And then you also have the blooming Rashid Shaheed, who's just been a big play magnet. Like he's not going to go away. Taysom Hill, he hasn't even been healthy, but I feel like he's still never going to go away. Like, is there really enough to go around in this offense? I don't know. If it's the offense we saw in week 1, maybe week 2, maybe.
No, I think if Davante Adams gets traded for the Saints trade for him, you're going to see everybody else's value and volume go down. Just because I think Davante is that type of receiver where he's so good, he's going to come in and earn all of these targets. And now Olave goes into a number 2 role. Rashid Shaheed is now just a deep threat that you target 2 or 3 times a game.
It'd be terrible for those two.
It's not great for all of those guys. But if we're talking only for Davante Adams, I have a hard time picking a situation that is better for him than the Saints.
I also have a question from like a cap perspective. Like, how is that going to work?
Don't make it work. They'll just restructure every other contract to make it work.
The Saints don't have a salary cap.
Yeah, they're the one team in the league that doesn't abide by the rules.
The Saints, I mean, like at some point, this is going to bite them in the butt. Like, you also have Chris Olave, who's going to be up for an extension end of this year, next year. Like,
those are next year problems, though. Like, and I think that's the way the Saints view this. Is like, let's go out. Yeah,
it's always Mardi Gras in New Orleans. They don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they'll be fine. Matt, I want to ask you one more question here before we move on. Of the 10 teams that you mentioned, which one would be the worst for Davante's fantasy value? Because I do think there is a chance that he lands with one of these teams where all of a sudden he's either playing with a bad quarterback or he's playing on an offense that already has another weapon that's going to steal targets away from him.
I would say Baltimore and Pittsburgh are pretty bad. I mean, they're so run heavy and they have another targets or 2, I mean, that would not be great just because the run pass ratio. The Patriots would be terrible, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, they probably don't belong on the list, to be honest with you. Washington would be great, though. I mean, Washington would be pretty high on the list. And I'm kind of rethinking Buffalo, too. Like, I understand they moved on from Diggs and they don't want to feature one guy, and it's working. But if they were to trade for Davante Adams, they're going to feature one guy. You know what I mean? If it were to, maybe they're not even interested for that reason, but
they at least have a quarterback that has a history of being able to feature one receiver and get him the type of targets that you need to become, a top 10 wide receiver. So I don't think it's all that likely, just because I think Joe Brady has a different style of offense they want to play. They don't want to be reliant on any one passing option. It'd be kind of fun, Matt. Like, it would be a lot of fun to watch
really
Josh
good.
Down throwing Adams. It'd be fun.
All right, you can't throw to Kincaid and Coleman and those guys either.
Well, they're not really throwing to Kincaid right now.
They're not.
It's making.
Let's just say though that like if Davante Adams goes to Washington, it's going to make segment 3 a really, really interesting conversation. Segment 3, by the way, listeners, we're talking about Jayden Daniels. This is going to be a spicy convo.
Brought to you by Kate Magic. Yeah, we'll talk about Jayden Daniels in segment 3. I promise.
And actually, in segment 3, maybe they could get Amari Cooper or Christian Kirk or DeAndre Hopkins or Deontay Johnson. I mean, I think there's several receivers to be had that could be on the move.
It does feel like Washington is going to make some kind of move at wide receiver. And I think if they beat the Browns this week and you're 4-1, and let's say the Cowboys fall to your Steelers, Matt, your Steelers, Kate, it's going to make it look like, hey, they have an actual chance to host a home playoff game. Let's not wait on this rebuild. Let's go do it now. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Here's an idea. The Browns do face the Commanders this week in Washington. They could just leave Amar there.
There you go. Nice.
Save on the plane ticket back, I like that.
Steelers play the Raiders next week, Kate.
Leave him.
He can line up against his old team in a week from now.
Let's go.
All right, enough of the Steelers talk. All right, let's talk about Rashee Rice, who has some sort of knee injury that we haven't quite heard about yet. But what are you doing with Rashee Rice in your dynasty leagues? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. We absolutely love PrizePicks here at the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. If you've never played PrizePicks before, it is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can win, again, up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the action on states including California, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup alive. It's absolutely fantastic. It's incredible. It's so easy to play. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Again, sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That is prizepicks.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are answering your mailbag questions. We got several about this next player, Rashee Rice, who, Matt, has some sort of knee injury. We're not sure what the severity is yet. Andy Reid said it's not good. He's out this week, but beyond that, it's been speculated that it's a torn ACL. What are you doing with Rashee Rice in your dynasty leagues? If you have him, are you holding him? If you don't have him, are you going out and trying to trade for him now?
I wish I could provide a little bit of guidance on this, but I don't know that any of us really have a strong answer because there's maybe a massive suspension looming. I mean, that hasn't gone away. And the uncertainty around this injury. I mean, I can't even put him on my IR because they're just hanging on to him. And I own him in both my redraft leagues, which wasn't great. And I'm not even going to cut him this week because I'm hoping that something miraculous happens this time next week. So I don't know how you comment on it. I think you just have to hold him.
Kate, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there are any other answers because we have no answers, right? It doesn't seem great. I'm trying to think back to a circumstance where we've looked at what appeared to be a devastating knee injury. The tests confirm, the field tests confirm ACL tear, and then the player's just fine. I'm not a medical expert. I am not pretending to know anything about Rashee Rice's knee injury here, but it didn't look good. Tape didn't look good. On-field test wasn't positive. I just have to imagine that even if it's not a torn ACL, I would have to speculate that it's something more serious than a quick one-off rust him up for a week. And again, this is just kind of me having watched the tape of the injury. I cringed. My insides curled up into a ball watching his knee twist that way. I don't know. And then you do have the suspension, but then again, I'm kind of lost trying to project the suspension as well, because, you had a pretty serious incident with a guy like Von Miller, and then that comes out to be a 4-game suspension. So is it really going to be this season-long suspension like you thought?
Okay, let's assume that he is out for the rest of the season, okay? And that there is some sort of suspension in 2025. How are you valuing him? Like, are you knocking him down like outside of your top 30 receivers, or is it even lower than that? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think you have to. I think there's first of all, the 20 to 30 range right now at wide receiver, I actually think is kind of a rich spot. You've got names like, George Pickens, Brian Thomas. Like there's a lot of, I think, high upside names in that range that you can pretty easily justify putting Rashee Rice, behind them in terms of their dynasty value. Because guess what? The biggest factor, like you can be as talented as all get out. This is a Josh Gordon comment. Like you can be talented as all get out, but if you're not on the field, that doesn't help me. That talent doesn't score fantasy points. Availability is step one in scoring fantasy points. And yeah, that inherently has to drop the value of Rashee Rice. If he's out of the game too for an extended period of time, what does that do for your conditioning? If you're already rehabbing from a lower body injury, and then,
what if he loses a step, right?
Yep.
You lose everything. Like we just saw Brandon Ayuk out for an off season. Dude could barely remember how to catch football. Like,
Well, I'll give you another one, and this is going to be near and dear to your guys' heart. Remember when Juju had that injury? Now I'm trying to remember the year. Was it 2019, 2020? And we thought, he missed the entire season. He came back and he was just a shell of himself at like 25 years old.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's going to happen with Rashee Rice. Knee injuries have gotten where players are getting back on the field faster than ever before, but that is always a possibility that he just gets back and he doesn't look like the same athlete that he was in year 2.
And like Juju, who might be taking on the Rashee Rice role here, neither one's super. They're not Jamison Williams in terms of explosiveness.
No.
If they lose a step, it might be Michael Thomas, at the end where you no longer are uncovering. And one insight I would say is if we think like the Chiefs are going to think on this issue, you have to assume, and I think everyone realizes that Kelsey gets a spike because of the injury, and they run a lot of the same routes. They're used in a lot of the same ways. The concepts are derived around them, whether it's WR or TE next to their name. But they're going to go get somebody. I mean, I really would be shocked if Kelsey's back next year. And if Rice has injury/suspension, their first-round pick might be a power slot.
It's possible. I also, Matt, I wanted to go through some trades that we have for Rashee Rice because we do have several over the last 48 hours. So again, these are all trades that are being done with the knowledge that Rashee Rice is probably out for the rest of the season. We had Rashee Rice for Michael Pittman's trade up. Is that a move that you would make if you had Pittman trying to acquire Rice?
I think I'll just take the bird in the hand with Pittman and someone else can have the headache. And maybe I'll end up kicking myself, but I still think Pittman's pretty good.
Kate.
Yeah, I think Pittman, talented wide receiver. You're just kind of hoping that Richardson gets it together. I'll probably take Pittman again because,
or you're hoping that he doesn't get it together and it's Flacco playing
Right.
quarterback.
I mean, George Flacco suddenly making Michael Pittman look like Jerry Rice. Like, I think interesting range of circumstances. But again, if you're in a win now mode like that to me is just the safer way to go.
A couple more here that I wanted to run through. We had, I know where Matt's going to lean on this one. Rashee Rice for Jackson Smith and Jigba straight up.
I'll take JSN.
Okay.
JSN.
Yeah. As much as I love Rashee Rice, that one's not close to me. And this last one is interesting. It's Rashee Rice for Chris Godwin straight up.
I don't know that he'll be a buck next year. I think I'll take Godwin. Especially if I'm win now, like if I'm sitting pretty after all those Rashee Rice, points got me and I'm having a good year, ride out Godwin for the rest of the year. I can always draft a receiver next year too.
Kate?
Yeah, I'll take Godwin there. Top 5 upside on.
See, I think I would take
given
Rice
week.
there. I'm taking Rice there, just betting on that he comes back at some point in 2025 and he's playing with Patrick Mahomes. But again, if you are, let's say you're 3-1, Rashee Rice has helped you get to 3-1. I can see the argument for Chris Godwin as well. All right, let's talk about Jayden Daniels. Kate can't wait long enough. She's just gonna jump out of her chair. How many quarterbacks would you take over Jayden Daniels in your dynasty leagues? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets that you can use on anything like maybe Steelers -2.5 against the Cowboys this week. Or maybe you want to go bet on Jayden Daniels to win the NFL MVP, not Rookie of the Year, but MVP. I kind of like those odds right now, especially with the Commanders sitting at 3-1. You can do all of this at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. We get some really good discussions on that show. Matt, you're on there on Fridays with Tony.
Exactly.
Make sure you check that out as well. But Kate, and we're going to start with you. This question comes from Billy. He wants to know, how many quarterbacks right now are you taking over Jayden Daniels in your dynasty leagues?
The answer is definitely not as many as you think. And I'm doing my I'm just like I'm honestly scared to let myself talk on this one. Josh Allen, QB1, pretty easily. Lamar Jackson, I think definitely making the case for QB2, only 27 years old. Obviously has the chops in the run game, has the upside as a passer, has good weapons around him. I gotta say, I think you can make the argument to take Jayden Daniels as your QB3 in Dynasty, and I'm not even trying to be facetious. Patrick Mahomes been kind of sitting pretty there at QB2, but it's been a minute since we've seen Patrick Mahomes be fantasy relevant to this point. The last 2 seasons has not been the same type of fantasy upside that we'd seen in previous seasons. And it hasn't felt like the floor was all that much safer either. A guy like Jalen Hurts, I think it might be time to have the conversation. Like he hasn't played particularly well, and obviously had some, AJ Brown's been out. Then you had Devontae Smith out with a concussion. So like, I don't want to, put too much on Jalen Hurts, but like, it's also a continuation of what we saw in the second half of last season. So how safe is Jalen Hurts? I don't know. From like a longevity standpoint, Jayden Daniels looks like the real deal. I'm sorry.
Matt?
Am I insane?
No, I thought I was going to be extreme because I think Josh Allen's the only 100% answer, that guys you take ahead of him. Daniels versus Lamar is 50-50 to me. I mean, Lamar.
You're like 5 years younger, though. Or I guess you're not 5
That's
years.
What I mean, you're 4 years younger.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something to, I know exactly what Lamar is for long stretches, and Daniels does have an injury history, but I think Daniels is my quarterback too. And a lot of these guys, it's not only because Daniels is skyrocketing, but Anthony Richardson can't complete passes. I have some questions about Hurts just as a football player. Mahomes has been an overrated fantasy asset for a while now. Stroud and Burrow don't run. Herbert doesn't throw the ball. I mean, so a lot of these guys that were in the neighborhood a couple of weeks ago are decreasing in value.
I'm with you. To me, it's Josh Allen's the only one that I know for sure that I would accept. Yeah. Every other one, I have some real questions about. Like you mentioned Jalen Hurts. It feels a little bit like we're in this Carson Wentz stage with Jalen Hurts that we were back in 2020, where it's like he's taking some bad sacks. It seems like the team is kind of quitting on him a little bit. The offense is broken. You mentioned Stroud, Burrow, both don't run. Herbert can't stay healthy. Real quick, Marcus,
anymore. Like next draft, the Eagles will trade up to the front of the second round and draft a quarterback, and we'll be like, here we go again,
they draft Shador. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
You're
Or
right,
they go
right.
draft like somebody like Cam Ward that gives them that athletic ability. So I'm agree. I also think I like one of the things I like about Jayden Daniels is I like the team that he's on. Kate and I talked about this in the offseason. Usually when you hire a defensive-minded head coach, they like to turtle, right? They want to play a slower brand of football. Again, 2 Steeler fans, I know who I'm talking to here. You know exactly what I mean. Dan Quinn has always been the opposite. His belief is, let's play fast, and that way you get into a shootout with us, and then we can have our pass rushers tee off on you, right? Like, he doesn't want to play a slow brand of football. He wants to play fast, and that's perfect for us in fantasy and dynasty, because that's just going to lead to more possessions and more opportunities for Jayden Daniels.
Guys, can I give you a fun fact? So dating back to week 1 of the 2023 season, how many games do you think CJ Stroud has with 24 or more fantasy points?
Is it 2?
I bet it's pretty
It's
low.
2. How about Mahomes?
Oh, 1?
Less.
2. Also 2. Jayden Daniels already has 3. So just wanted to
The
point
power
that out.
of rushing.
Yeah.
He's got almost 300 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns already this year. Like, this is the time. If you're going to have Jayden Daniels, like, this is the time now while he's young and can still run. That list is pretty small, Matt. It's very, very small.
Yeah, and you got to think just big picture that his weapons, his O-line only gets better.
After they get Amari Cooper here in the next week, it's really going to get a lot
Put
better.
Davante
Right?
Adams on the team.
Or Davante Adams. Yeah, there you go. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. Check us out on YouTube. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.